Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing? What do they think we might? I've got no rhythm. Today I'm going to do a short review about a book that took a short amount of time to read, and it is Treacle Walker by Alan Garner. I guess it could be retitled Marmite Walker because this book seems to have polarized a lot of the people who have read it. For my part, I loved it. Treacle Walker by Alan Garner was an absolute banger for me. I last read Alan Garner probably 40 plus years ago. I think I read one of his books called Elidor. I feel like I might have started the Owl Service, but it creeped me out. Elidor, I think, was pure fantasy. It was a book we read in school. I don't have a copy, which means it was either a school book or it was a book that was on our shelves that my mum purged. But the Owl Service kind of weirded me out. He's got a book called The Weird Stone of Rising Almond. It was like some creepy stuff that I wasn't into at that age at all, and I feel like I'm much more open to the kind of stuff he's putting out, and partly because some other books that I've read that I think are in a similar vein, and I'll talk about those. Treacle Walker is told from the point of view of a young boy, Joseph Coppock, and there's a very real literary trope of adults trying to write through the eyes of children. I think it's a very hard thing to pull off, and I think he does it here. And I think he does it because he understands the limitations that children have in their perception and their experience of the world, because they've experienced so little of the world. So in this book, Joseph is on his own. He's living in a house. There are no parents. We don't ever hear about him who's preparing food for him or anything like that. It's entirely isolated experience, and that's very familiar. It resonated very strongly with me as what it was like when you were a child, when you were left to your own devices, when you're up in your room playing with your Lego or with your marbles, as Joseph does, or reading comic books. The world was entirely self-contained, entirely your own, and nothing outside interfered with it. And you told your own stories and created your own mythologies about what this meant and what that meant. And Joseph does it with his marbles, how this marble means this, and this is his favorite because of the way it reflects and the way it looks like this. So that resonated very strong with me. And then there are actual sort of physical memories triggered. There's a point where he just puts one of the marbles in his mouth, and suddenly I felt that. I remembered that feeling of putting a marble in your mouth and feeling it cold and hard and pushing it against your teeth and rubbing on your tongue and taking it out. And it just felt that he was able to access these feelings of what it was like to be a child, left to your own devices and making sense of the world. Also, in this world that Joseph lives in, there is magic, but it's not the kind of magic of card tricks or even staffs being turned into snakes. It is a natural magic. This is a very sort of English phenomenon, and I guess the closest memory you might have is that feeling again when you're a child and you're walking through the woods and every tree seems scary and magical. Every bit of weather seems more powerful than perhaps it is when you have a greater understanding of the world. There is something very raw about being a child, being surrounded by nature, and that's what we're exploring here, and I was totally here for it. And I want to give some context about some other books sort of dabbling in the same world. Most recently we had Lanny by Max Porter, which I really loved, and there's a sort of a dead Papa Toothwort is the character who's lives under the ground and in this suburban town, is part of the scenery and part of nature, and we have to determine if he is a positive, a force for good, or a force for evil, or a neutral force, which is one of the ways that nature is often powerful but indifferent. And that is, that's the way that different times, different people have related to nature, or dare I say, a deity. That sense of, is it something for good? Is it something for bad? Is it something we can harness? Is it something we can access? And that's very much, I think, what's going on in these two books. If you're looking for something chunkier, meatier, I've got here Jonathan Strange and Miss Norrell by Susanna Clarke, who published Piranesi last year, which was fantastic. It's a much chunkier book, but also right there in that world of the fairy and the magical old England, where everything is crows and dark forests, and strange things happening, which again, it's not classical wizardry like you might think of I don't know, wands and Harry Potter style wizardry. It's much closer to I guess, the Arthurian legend and Merlin and the power in the land and the power in the earth and the spirits of nature that live and dwell around us. Of course, it goes all the way back to, I guess, further than that, but you've got Arthurian legend, then you've got Shakespeare taps into it in A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is supposed to be set for some reason in outside Athens, and yet all the characters, all the fairies, seem to me very British. So you've got Puck or Robin Goodfellow, Titania and Oberon. You've got all the other fairies, Cobweb and Mustard Seed. Even the mechanicals always seem very British to me. Bottom being turned into an ass and all that. And then revisiting Puck, we've got Kipling, of course. You've got Puck of Pook's Hill, which is published as a children's book. This is Piccolo, I guess, was the Pan equivalent of Puffin, as Puffin was to Penguin, Piccolo was to Pan books, I believe. So I've got Puck of Pook's Hill in Piccolo, and then I've got Rewards and Fairies, which is a kind of sequel. We revisit the same characters, including Puck, and I have this in this Penguin 20th century classics. I know Kipling is awfully out of fashion, but he's all playing with these same tropes of the fairy, and then the influences go all the way to Neil Gaiman, if you read him, and any modern fantasy that's dealing with the Fae and dealing with the other people that live alongside us, I think is tapping into this. And there's something of that in Treacle Walker, but he managed to create something else as well. It has its own language, it has its own rhythm, which is very accessible. I guess some people think it's childish, but I think it is childish, but it is calling to the child in all of us. So I think it resonates with us as adults because it recalls something we remember from our childhood. I think this is very readable, and it shouldn't take more than an hour if you read it. So it's people saying they started this and they couldn't get through it is beyond my understanding, because it's very accessible, very readable, but I think rich as well. I wanted to pick out one passage, and I've chosen a passage without dialogue because I think a lot of it is meant to be done in or is spoken in a sort of Yorkshire Northern English dialect and accent, which I can't really pull off. But there's a section here which I think explains the urgency and the rhythm of the language. And this is somewhere in the middle. Joseph is in his room. Bang, bang, bang. 3 times the handle on the door. Joe shot under the blankets and tugged them over his head. Bang, bang, bang. He reached for his pillow and covered his ears. Bang, bang, bang. He was sweating. His eyes were shut. All he saw were swirls of purple on the black of his lids. He had no spit. The thud in his ears made the silence worse. He could not slow his breath. Stillness. He moved the pillow and pulled the blankets down to his nose and opened his eyes. The sun shone sideways in the window and the sky was bright. He sat up and listened. Stillness. Joe climbed down and moved over the floor, not letting the boards creak, to the edge of the window frame and looked out. The pony and cart were under the pair, and Treacle Walker was on the path by the door, holding the round handle. "You daft beggar." It is a joy the way the words flow. There are old words. Joe is referred to by one character as whirligig. There's all sorts of portmanteau words and mashing together of ideas and syllables and sounds. I really enjoy this. I found it accessible. Yes, it's weird, and it's a little bit funky, and it's got references to comic books that come alive. And if you didn't grow up with that kind of world, the bang kapow kind of excitement in your life, and the sort of the feeling when you read kapow on a page, how it actually felt and resonated with you as a kid. Yeah, that was kapow. Someone got punched. Something thud. Something landed with a thud. Those kind of things were very real, and so I think textually this resonated with me very much. And just all round joy to read. And I think if you are open to this, and if you have fond memories of what it was like to be a child, I think you will find the joy and the magic in Treacle Walker by Alan Garner. Thanks very much. Bye.